With a minimum requirement of 8GB RAM, Ryzen 5 CPU and GTX 1060 4GB VRAM, a true high-end PC game, Callisto Protocol is a great combination of Dead Space and Outlast, where you outrun, fight and try to survive as zombie/infected inmates apocalypse. So how do you achieve 60 FPS of this game? Or how do you even fix the lagging, stuttering and crashing whenever you set the game? I'm Mr.CanIplay and welcome back to my channel where I do low spec gaming tutorials. The goal here is to get you to play any game that you'd love on a low-end device. Now before deep diving into the tips that can get you smoother gameplay, there's one thing that you need to know about the game, which is the constant crashing that happens when you start the game. Now this happens with no message about updating your drivers or missing files. Now for this, please open Steam and access the setting panel at launch options and type in one of these three settings: -DX12, -D3D11 or -DX11. Now on high settings, we get a maximum of 40 FPS on ultra settings with AMD FSR set to quality at 720p and 50 FPS on very low settings and AMD FSR set to ultra performance at 720p, and this is when I use a dedicated GPU. Now there are two tricks that will get you more FPS. Now number one is lowering your in-game settings, which applies to those with dedicated GPU. Now the in-game settings give us multiple options to tweak to our liking, which are only accessible on the main menu and not mid-game, which is kind of frustrating because we can't lower the settings mid-game. So let's check each option and see the changes they bring and even compare when set to low versus high. Resolution quality, which sets the image quality, can be reduced to as low as 30 in the configuration file, which is my preference, and the image quality becomes quite fuzzy. View distance, which helps render distant objects, making them more visible, gives you an extra 10 FPS when lowered and makes distant objects barely visible. Anti-aliasing, which helps smoothen the lines and edges of objects, when set to 0, makes the objects have zigzag lines and raggedy edges. Shadow quality, which is one that takes toll on GPUs, gives extra FPS when set to 0, but visually doesn't make any difference between 0 and max settings. Texture quality helps in image quality and the feel of all objects in the game, giving us a box image quality on the objects when set to 0. Effects quality, which shows us stuff like blood and innards, give very poor image quality, and even the gore effects during the fights are less gory. Film grain, which brings a cinematic and fog-like effect, makes the image quality clearer when set to 0, and even the gas coming from the ceiling is barely seen. Now reflection, which bounces lights off objects, making it more realistic, makes the lighting dull even on reflective objects like glasses flow and even the spilt blood. Now lighting, when set to 0, slightly reduces the amount of light in distant areas but get lit when you get closer to the area, which is basically a way for your GPU to render less images. Now the second trick that you need to do is tweak the configuration file in the game user settings in appdata local folder and open it with WordPad. Now set the resolution quality to as low as 30 and change the rest of these values to 0. Basically we're breaking down the graphics to earn us a few more FPS. Now this works well for those with integrated graphics. Now with that, let's check out how it looks, feels and even compare to maximum settings.